Hello, you guys, and welcome to another video that we're doing today that's dedicated all to thyroid health. And, there's such a huge connection between estrogen dominance and thyroid conditions that I thought there's just no point of doing this video without really addressing, the issue of estrogen dominance and thyroid specifically. So I wonder how many of you here are struggling with thyroid conditions. So whether it's Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, and if you experience thyroid nodules, you've been diagnosed with maybe hyperthyroidism, or you have a history of thyroid cancer, do tell us and introduce yourself if that's okay with you. So I wanted to talk about this because, and first of all, we had a guest speaker invited today, and she got stuck in a different country. Couldn't fly out on time. So I am perfectly happy to do this segment on my own because I can talk about Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions in my sleep. And really, this is my story. It really started off with, this is really the reason why I'm sitting and talking to you about this today, the reason why you see this book created here, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, is because in 2008, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. And everything changed from that point on. So I'm going to come back to this in a second. But in case you've been missing out, my new book, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, which is right here, is now out. It's just been released. And so if you're planning to get it, do go to overcomingestrogendominance.com, get the coupon from there, or rather, pick a place to buy. So like on Amazon, for example, come back to this website, enter your receipt number, and we'll send you a gift card that comes with the purchase of this book. And we're only doing this for a limited period of time until the 24th of this month. So that's that. The other thing I want to just mention is that I'm going to be giving one book away on today's call. And the way we do this is the book giveaway is going to be based on an answer you correctly answering a question that I'm going to ask you that's based on the talk that I'm going to do today, okay? So if you tune in for the next 15, 20 minutes, maybe maximum half an hour, and then I'm going to pop a question. And then if you get it right, my team is going to select the winner of the answer. Okay, so Hashimoto's. So who here is struggling with your thyroid? And, one thing I will say that's really interesting is that a lot of times when we have a hormonal imbalance, it's never one type of hormonal imbalance. So very seldom that I see women who just have estrogen dominance problems and no other hormonal issues. So the most common combinations that I see a lot of the time is that women who have estrogen dominance also have thyroid conditions. I also have seen a lot of women with thyroid conditions who also are in menopause. And menopause can trigger Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And then a lot of times I also see women who have estrogen dominance and PCOS, for example, right? And so PCOS is a lot of times is high testosterone levels, and then the testosterone converts to estrogen, so that woman tends to be not only high in testosterone, be growing hair out here, growing cysts on her ovaries, but also has high estrogen levels, right? And so those are some of the really common ones. Something what we call adrenal fatigue, which is more the HPA axis dysregulation. So from your hypothalamus to your adrenals, the pituitary adrenal function can be highly dysregulated, and that can be really with any of the combinations as well. And oftentimes, again, with thyroid is often the problem. So, as much as my book is about overcoming estrogen dominance, I really want to address the thyroid problem because many of the solutions in the book is also going to help you if you have a thyroid condition. And so many of you, I suspect for those of you who are here listening today, you already know you've been diagnosed with a thyroid condition. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the symptoms because I feel like it's one of the most underestimated, together with estrogen dominance, of course, it's one of the most underestimated conditions, hormonal conditions that is highly misdiagnosed, undiagnosed by traditional allopathic doctors. And even some naturopaths also can miss it too. So let's take a look at the symptoms. The symptoms of hypothyroidism include things like you suddenly, for a lot of women, is putting on a lot of weight. And so you go like, well, my diet hasn't changed, my exercise routine hasn't changed, yet I've just put on another 10 pounds, and then next month is another 3 pounds, and nothing else has changed. My diet is the same, exercise is the same. So sudden weight gain. Another one is, a very, very common one is horrendous fatigue. Fatigue, when I'm talking about fatigue, is just like, it's not just feeling tired. It's like life has just been sucked out of you, okay? And you can't start the day without like having 3 cups of coffee, kind of a fatigue. Another one is your quality of your hair starts changing, right? And it's not the hair falling in the front hair. That's typically high testosterone. If you have like hair loss, women who have thinning hair and front hair tends to be high blood sugar levels, high testosterone is a metabolic issue. It's more of all around the head and more so on the sides here. And so suddenly, you find yourself like, oh my God, it's like so much hair is coming out. I've never seen so much of hair in your bathroom, in a tub, when you take a shower. Another one is your nails start breaking and get really rigidity. You might be also losing on the point of hair. You can be also some women start losing the 1/3 of their eyebrows on the sides here, but also some women also start losing their eyelashes. I've worked with, when I was in private practice, I remember working with a woman who lost all her eyelashes, and she was a model. And so that was the end of her career, at least temporarily, when she lost all her eyelashes. Another one is a lot of women with hypothyroidism would have a lot of difficulty getting pregnant or having miscarriages early on. Thyroid hormone helps for the fetus to grow, and it's a growth hormone for children, right? So, for example, children with an impaired thyroid don't grow as they should. So for the fetus, it's the same thing. That's one of the reasons why, skilled doctors should know that if a woman is on thyroid medication, when she gets pregnant, she immediately has to increase the dose in order to accommodate the growth of the need of the fetus, right? So having hypothyroidism, it's like your body aborts, right? It's because you just don't have enough hormone in order to carry through a healthy pregnancy. A few other things that really comes up with thyroid is feeling cold all the time. And this is not just like, those women have like always cold hands, cold feet. In summer, you might be like sitting and everybody's in t-shirts and you're like the only one with a sweater on, right? And it's a kind of cold, it's not just like a superficial cold, it's like on the inside, you're just feeling so cold. So that's another one. Somebody's asking about, so many of you are just connecting with me on the different issues here. And so, another one which I had was having anxiety attacks. So, especially when you know yourself and you know that, like, okay, in general, I'm this kind of person, and I'm going to talk about my story in just a second. But you kind of know yourself, and then suddenly you started, nothing else has changed in your life, right? No, your circumstances are the same. And then suddenly, out of the blue, you just have these anxiety panic attacks, right? And I had that, and it was incredibly scary and worrying. The other one is a lot of women deal with depression when they have a low thyroid function. So, and that's one of the interesting things about depression, right? Is that we put people on SSRIs without asking the question, why is the person depressed in the first place? Is there hormonal imbalance? Is there some kind of deficiency of a micronutrient or a vitamin or a mineral, right? So those are some of the big ones. Somebody was asking about headaches. I wouldn't connect that so much. If it's a hormonal headache, it's typically because of low progesterone, and that could be cyclical. A lot of headaches are related to food sensitivities. But anyway, that's a separate topic. I don't want to talk about that. So I want to just tell you a little bit about my story with Hashimoto. So, I think I had a thyroid problem ever since I was a young girl. One of the photos on my website, on the About page, shows me standing in a backyard in my school. I went to a British school in Malaysia. Now, if you're not familiar, Malaysia is a tropical country. And it was right after doing sports. I used to stay after school for a lot of sports because I was very athletic. And I'm standing there wearing this really thick cotton long sleeve sweatshirt, right? And for those of you who have ever been to like Florida, like south of Florida, or you've been to a tropical country, it's really, really hot, right? And on top of that, Malaysia is an incredibly humid country. So you're just perspiring just so much, right? And so I remember looking at this photograph and I'm like smiling and I realized this today that, I wore this thick sweatshirt because I was cold all the time. So, I think a lot of people start having thyroid issues. And if you start thinking about your own health history, right? It could be that it's just something that there's a genetic predisposition. Please don't surrender to the thought that Hashimoto's is genetic. You inherited a genetic predisposition. My mother has an active Hashimoto's disease, which she refuses to deal with, and she's still very symptomatic, and she's got very high antibodies, whereby I'm in total remission from Hashimoto's with very little symptoms, if any, and they do come back if I do stupid things, basically. And I can talk about that, like what constitutes being silly in that way. So, but really where, when I think about it, the actual diagnosis happened in 2008. I was living in Shanghai in China, and I suddenly found myself I think I had hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism at the same time, which you can have that. You can have Graves and Hashimoto's, a hyper and hypothyroidism at the same time. The reason why that happens is because when your thyroid is underactive or is rather attacked by Hashimoto's, by your own immune system, right? Which is in the case of Hashimoto's, and I'll explain this in a second. Then what happens is that the thyroid starts slowing down because of the attack of the immune system. But once in a while, it kicks back in and kind of like, it wants to still function because the body is asking for more thyroid hormone. It's demanding more thyroid hormone for you to function properly. So what may end up resulting before a total failure of the thyroid, you might be swinging between being hyper and being hypo at the same time. And I wonder how many of you here have ever felt that way. And symptoms of hyperthyroidism, right, is, as the name implies, you're hyper. So you might be getting like literally shaking hands. You kind of like jittery on the inside. You're almost feeling like you're hyperglycemic. You have racing thoughts. You can't sleep at night. You get heart palpitations at times. You get a lot of anxiety. You start having, blow-ups at people for no good reason. You might your hands are always wet and perspiring, right? You might be beginning to lose hair. Some women lose weight, and some other women put on weight at the same time. So it can be. Carla is asking, is it possible for both at the same time? Yeah, like I said, you can. You can experience both of them. So this was my story. In 2008, when living in Shanghai in China, I started feeling an incredible sense of fatigue. And I resisted going to see a doctor for a while because my lifestyle was such, which I'm sure has contributed towards Hashimoto's, where I was constantly on the road. I was in a regional job. I was based I was actually living in two places, believe it or not. I had an apartment in Hong Kong and I had an apartment in Shanghai. So I was living between two mega cities, covering the region. So every week I was in a different country, Taiwan, Singapore. I'll fly down to Malaysia. Then I'll be different parts of China. I'll be back in Hong Kong, right? And so, and all of that, like for my friends, it felt very glamorous to have a friend like that. And they'll call me up and say, I'm not going to ask you, how are you? I'm going to ask you, where are you, right? Ha ha, that was funny. And I will admit, I am such a high-strung and type A personality driven. And I think especially in your 20s and 30s as women, we get a lot of validation from work. And I was really, really good at what I was doing. I used to work for an advertising agency. And I was working on Fortune 100 brands. So like, we had clients like Johnson & Johnson and Nike and Volkswagen and some amazing, amazing clients. So I was really addicted to my success and how good I was and the fact that everybody wanted me and all of that. And so the price that I was paying effectively was to live on airplanes, live on hotel food, right? And, any one of you who you've been on a flight, those flights are not very long in Asia, but like typically they will average 3 to 4 hours. And that, you're tired and then you have to go through airports. There's international travel each time. It's not like in the US where you don't have to go through customs every time, right? And so, and then, I was always the girl on a Sunday night who has to take a flight somewhere because on Monday there's some kind of a presentation I have to do or some pitch that I have to lead or whatever. So it stopped being glamorous when I started getting really sick. And this is where the fatigue really started setting in. I also started losing my sense of memory. There was another thing that I still remember. There was a meeting we went to at Nike's office. They gave us a new brief, and I didn't remember the following day anything what they were talked about, and so I had to refer to my notes, and that was really scary. I also started having anxiety attacks, which I had never ever had in my life, and that was incredibly worrying. And getting into them really foul moods of just like going on these rants for a long time until my colleagues were like, "Whoa, never seen you like this before," right? And also a sense of helplessness of living in China where you cannot control the quality of air you're inhaling, the quality of water you're drinking, the quality of food that's available to you. You know, all of that was super polluted and super just unhealthy. And so I think, you know, this is when I went to get my diagnosis, and I wasn't surprised I was super, super lucky to be diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease so early. And I think the only reason why she decided to go for the thyroid markers is because I told her that 10 years prior to that, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. So I didn't mention that in my late 20s, I had Graves' disease. So Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease that causes hyperthyroidism. So the symptoms that I was telling you about hyperthyroidism, I've experienced all of them. And to be honest with you, between hypo and hyper, I'll take hypo anytime. Hyperthyroidism just makes you a monster, and you can't sleep. And it's like you are beyond recognizing yourself, and you're just like amped up all the time. It's crazy. So, so this is where, you know, when I was diagnosed, this is 2008. So remember, this is 12, 13 years ago, right? And there was no books. There was one book. There was one book that was available about hypothyroidism. So guess what? I paid 3 times more for shipping than the book itself. So I know many of you are complaining about this book costing a lot of money to ship, but you know, that's what it is when you live overseas from the place of publishing. So I got the book shipped, and all I learned from that book, it said, stop eating soy and stop eating kale, right? And that was it. And I'm like, well, that's it? There was no websites. There were no holistic practitioners. There was only one friend I had who had thyroid cancer, and she was from Venezuela originally. So I was considering flying from Shanghai to Caracas, which is one of the most crime-ridden cities in the world, on a 24-hour flight, an $8,000 ticket, just to talk to someone who understands functional medicine and could help me with my thyroid. I ended up not going because I found a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner in Shanghai, and that helped me somewhat. But she didn't know anything about diet. And so, you know, this is where really my discovery started. But the realization really set in when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, is that intuitively I knew that my lifestyle didn't serve me, that what I was doing wasn't healthy, that I was fed by my own ego and some kind of, you know, crazy need for validation from external sources. And so this is where, you know, I ended up quitting my job in Shanghai. They got transferred out to the United States with the job. I quit, but they recruited me in another office in the United States. And I went to school, to nutrition school. And this is really where, you know, I got fired, and I got fired from the job in Seattle. And then I ended up setting up my own business right after that. So this was 11 years ago. And so here we have it. I'm talking to you now about all of this stuff, right? Now, so one thing is, if you ever find yourself thinking, oh my God, this, like, I'm having this Hashimoto's disease or hypothyroidism, and it's so complicated, it's so difficult. Let me tell you, you're so lucky with the amount of resources that are available today on this topic, versus there was nothing 13 years ago just to figure out even what do I need to do to help myself, right? So a couple of things that I mentioned here, and I want to talk about a few things before I proceed to, I'll take some of your questions in just a second. I want to explain the difference between hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's disease. So they are typically together, and hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease, okay? So what's really important to what is really important to understand is that 95% of women who have hypothyroidism, okay, if you're displaying the symptoms that I talked about, if you've been diagnosed by your doctor with hypothyroidism, most likely is Hashimoto's disease. So 95% of cases in the United States with hypothyroidism are caused by Hashimoto's disease. And that's important to understand, you guys, because hypothyroidism just means that your thyroid is slowing down, is not releasing as much hormone as it should. But knowing that it's Hashimoto's is when you understand that it is the immune system that is attacking your thyroid. And actually, when you have Hashimoto's, you don't have a thyroid problem. You have an immune problem. And so that's important to differentiate, because then you shift gears and you say, I am not so much talking, I shouldn't be focusing on fixing my thyroid alone. I really should be fixing my immune system to calm it down, appease it, detox my body so the immune system isn't going haywire, right? Rather than be just focusing on my thyroid. Does this make sense? Okay. The same thing happens with hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease, where Graves is the immune disease, and hyperthyroidism is when you have overactive thyroid. Again, most of the overactive thyroid conditions are caused by Graves' disease. Okay, so again, with Graves, you want to be addressing the immune system. And guess what? When I was diagnosed with Graves' disease in my late 20s, you know what? The doctor put me on. It's like the equivalent of I'm forgetting the name of the drug right now. If anybody's on this here, it starts with the mezavapine. Anyway, it's a thyroid blocker. And so he put me on it, right? And 3 months later, I was okay. So he ran my numbers again. He's like, well, you're cured, right? And this is a really good example of when you don't address the root cause of a problem. You can't blame him. I mean, he was an allopathic doctor. He was a traditionally metamazone. That's the one Tanya said. Thank you. That's the one. And so what happened was that, he never mentioned that Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease. I should be really looking at appeasing my immune system, because then I'll ask him, how do I do that? And he wouldn't have an answer for that, right? So instead, they just put you on thyroid blockers and declare you healthy. But then because I didn't address my gut health, I didn't address all the food sensitivities I was having, or the parasites that I was having, right? All of that came back and bit me in the butt 7 years later, when I was diagnosed then with Hashimoto's disease, right? And so one of the common things that happens in our world with autoimmunity is that same as hormonal imbalances, as oftentimes you don't have just one hormonal imbalance, you tend to have a few of them at the same time. And I have found the same thing with autoimmunity, where you have a lot of times women start off with Hashimoto's, and then when they don't address it, 2 years later, it's like, oh, now I have rosacea. 2 years later, oh, now I have, like, my joints are really hurting. Well, guess what? Rheumatoid arthritis could be the cause of all this, right? And so they're kind of like adding layers and layers of new autoimmune diseases, right? But guess what? The root cause of all of them is the same. And that's predominantly the health of your gut, okay? So and this is the reason why in all my books, whether you have my first book or this new book now, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, it's based on the premise of the three-legged stool analogy, where a healthy immune system and healthy endocrine system, which is your hormones, rests on three specific things: your liver, the health of your liver, the health of your gut, and blood sugar balance, okay? And guess what? Every single of my colleagues, whether it's Dr. Isabella Wentz, whether it's Dr. Alan Christensen, whether it's Dr. Karazian, I mean, those are some of the big gurus of the thyroid world, teach exactly the same thing about these three body systems. So it is very likely that if you fix and follow the protocols here, you will get a lot of relief from your autoimmune diseases as well. So one other thing I want to talk about is the difference between, I want to talk about why thyroid conditions in this country are so severely misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, and just undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, and just not diagnosed at all, right? So undiagnosed, yeah. And the reason is that we have very archaic, even though there's a whole community of women who have a nonprofit that pitches the new improved ways of testing to the American Thyroid Association, the ATA somehow does not disseminate the information down to the doctors. And so doctors who come out of med schools are thought the old, very archaic way of seeing the thyroid. And the problem is that typically if you go and see your doctor and say, hey doc, suddenly I'm tired like crazy. My hair is falling out, okay? I've put on 10 pounds in the past month, no reason whatsoever, right? I can't get out of bed. What's going on? And then, they go, well, let's test your thyroid. Okay, that's a pretty good doctor. Let's test your thyroid. So then they run a test. And what do they test for? TSH, thyroid, and Taylor, if we can pause that. TSH, so thyroid stimulating hormone. Then they will test T4, your total T4. Okay, so that's the first thyroid hormone that gets produced. Maybe some of them will do total T3, maybe. Okay, so that's a golden standard in today's endocrinologist's office. Let me tell you, when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease, I insisted on getting the antibodies tested. My TSH was perfect, even by functional medicine standards. My T3 and T4 were all within range, no problem whatsoever. Yet I felt so sick. And the reason was that you can still be within a range, but you have to remember one thing. A range is just a range. For example, the TSH, it says it can be from 0.5 to 5.5. 0.5 to 5.5. Hey, you guys, that's a big range, It's like, it could be that you might need to be at a 1 in order to feel good, where I need to be at a 2 in order to feel good. Okay, so this first thing is the range. The second thing is, when it comes to thyroid testing, is that you're not interested in looking at a total T4 and T3. You want to look at the free T3 and the free T4. And the reason is that, Taylor, if you can find that on our Trello cards on what are the full thyroid lab panel to test for, that will be good to share that with folks. So the free T3 and T4 will show you what is the bioavailable hormone what is the bioavailable version of T3 and T4 your body can actually utilize. When you have your receptors, like your hair follicles have receptors for thyroid. Your brain has follicles for thyroid, right? So make you sharp and not make you depressed and don't make you anxious, right? Your skin has got all of that. So we've got receptors. The receptors don't take the total T4. They only take the free T3 or the free T4. And so to understanding what is bioavailable for your body is paramount. For some weird reason, from some old dogma from 30, 40 years ago, these standards have not changed. And so they still test you for the for the total T4, which is completely useless. So that's one element, right? Free versus total. The other problem is that they also test, a lot of doctors who just do a TSH and then just do a T4. Well, guess what? The T4 is useless. T4 is what your thyroid is producing first. And then it goes into your liver and your gut, where it gets converted to T3, right? And this is the T3 is the working horse. That's what gives you energy. That's what gives you power in the brain. That's what gives you beautiful hair. That's what gives you glowing skin, energy, right? To get up and be yourself. So there's a lot of nuances. And what we're going to do is we will post a full lab panel of tests that you should be ordering and just insist. But more importantly, so those are thyroid markers. But remember, I said when you have hypothyroidism, and most likely it's Hashimoto's disease, it's really you want to establish how overactive is your immune system, because that's what you end up going to be treating, and not your thyroid alone. Okay, thyroid is is the next step, right? It's the first step is your immune system. So you need to test for two kind of antibodies. And one is called TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and the other one is anti-TG, anti-thyroglobulin antibodies. And guess what? A lot of women who have a high TG antibodies also tend to be very estrogenic. That's another story for a little bit later. So in summary, this is the list. If you are writing this down right now, the list of things that you want to test for is TSH, That's a given. That's fine. Free T3, free T4 hormone, and then you want to test for TPO antibodies and anti-TG antibodies. Okay, so 5 markers altogether. Only with these 5 markers, you'll be able to conclude whether you have a thyroid problem or otherwise. Okay. So that's about testing. There's a few other nuanced things about, about ranges. I'll just mention maybe just very briefly that, one of the problems also with thyroid conditions and getting results is the range that you're using. So remember how I said just now the ranges are very wide. And then, like you might need to be 1 at TSH, I might need to be 2. And the difference between 1 and 2 is it's double. If you think about it, it's double, right? That's a lot. So ranges also should be looked at from a functional medicine perspective. Ranges, which is much more narrow, and is considered for healthy people, and not the lab ranges that you're given when you get your blood work. And by the way, thyroid you can test through blood work. You don't do that through urine or saliva, unlike your steroid hormones like cortisol, progesterone, testosterone, all that. So blood is perfectly fine, and you want to make sure that then they fall into functional ranges. Okay. So Alina is asking, what are the 5? So one more time, I'm just going to repeat: is TSH, free T3, free T4, TPO antibodies, and anti-TG antibodies. Those are the 5. Hey, you guys, we also have a good friend of mine, Dr. Alan Hopkins, runs a company called yourlabwork.com, and they made a special panels for us with some special discounts for the Hormones Balance community. So Taylor just mentioned that, just posted that the URL there is yourlabwork.com/hormonesbalance. That's where you can order the labs yourself. And then you can work with a functional doctor or practitioner, even remotely, once you have the lab work back, to help you interpret them. And we also have a link. Taylor has also posted a link of how you can find a functional practitioner. And if you are struggling, then just email us to email my team, and then we'll connect you with the right people. I have a number of colleagues who still do private consultations, and they'll be happy to connect with you. And one of the good things that COVID has brought on is the fact that a lot of people are now allowed to do telemedicine without being licensed in every single state. So that's one of the cool things about that. Okay, so why don't we just open this up for a little bit of questions? And actually, before I do that, why don't we just do the book giveaway first? So my question for you is, what are the 2 markers to test for to establish that you have an autoimmune disease? Okay, whether you have Hashimoto, specifically Hashimoto's disease, what are the 2 markers that indicate you might be having Hashimoto's disease? Okay. All right, so let's pop a few questions, you guys, and Tyler, let's bring on the Q&As and pick some of those good ones, and then I can answer them right here. Will allopathic doctors run these tests through insurance? That's a great question, and it kind of depends on a doctor. So if I have worked with an allopathic doctor before, where I would come there from like a place of knowing my stuff and twist her arm to measure those, and she did it, and it went through insurance. It kind of depends on the doctor, but yes, it's completely possible to do that. Is kale bad? No. So sorry. So that was kind of like my takeaway from that book, was just complete rubbish. And kale is not bad for you. In fact, one of the myths about hypothyroidism is that you need to eliminate all the cruciferous vegetables, which, hey, you guys, please don't do that. I have never come across anyone who's removed all the cruciferous vegetables out of her diet, right? So cruciferous vegetables, well, they call it goitrous, like, I hate that word, goitrogenic vegetables, and because they can cause goiter. What causes goiter is things like soy, and tons of it, and processed soy. That's what causes goiter. The cruciferous vegetables like kale and cabbage and broccoli sprouts and Brussels sprouts and mustard seeds and all the turnips and radishes and kale and all that, right? All cruciferous vegetables. There is this myth that was copied by one blogger to another saying, oh, they're going to kill your thyroid. Like I said, I don't know anyone who's removed all the cruciferous vegetables and saved her thyroid or recovered from Hashimoto's disease. It doesn't exist. In fact, if anything, things like kale and all the cruciferous vegetables, they are hugely supportive towards your liver. And one of the things that about thyroid conditions is that, like I said before, your T4 hormone converts to T3, which is your working horse, in the liver. So having a really clean liver is paramount in thyroid health. In fact, Dr. Isabella Wentz has got a whole chapter on how to support your liver. And there's a reason behind that. So no, kale is absolutely not bad. Alex is saying, when you say Hashimoto's in remission, does it mean showing no more TP antibodies or showing a small amount of them? Yeah, so it depends. So you remember how I said that if I behave myself, if I don't behave myself. So if I go to, say, Italy and eat pasta every other day and have, coffee and such, I'm not an ice cream person, so I don't typically do that. I have a glass of wine because I like wine. I'll come back and my Hashimoto's is the antibodies are elevated. So typically when people say in remission, it's a questionable area. Like, for example, Dr. Wentz will say that if your antibodies are below 100, she will consider that remission. I would consider remission low antibodies, like, okay, below 100, but also somebody who's completely asymptomatic, right? So you don't have the cold hands anymore. You're not shivering. You're not losing hair. All the symptoms I talked about. Mary's asking, what would be a reason for all these symptoms to come and go on Synthroid? Since having a child at 18, I now eat clean, fresh, farm to table, and less is more. Yeah. So what would be the reason for all these symptoms to come and go? So a lot of things. What can trigger Hashimoto's, like what I said, it can be food. So, one of the ways, anything that aggravates the gut. So there are specific patches that connect the immune system to the digestive health, right? To your digestion rather. And so anybody who's been having, most people you see with Hashimoto's disease also have a lot of gut issues. So any functional practitioner's 101 first step in dealing with Hashimoto's is to restore digestive health. So what could be the reason? So many of them. It could be food sensitivities that aggravate your gut, and that's what causes the Hashimoto's to flare up, right? It could be parasites. You suddenly go to a new place or travel to a new country and you contract parasites. It could be low stomach acid, can be a huge trigger for the immune system as well. It could be stress. I mean, so many, one of the things I used to do when I was in private practice with my clients, was to draw out a timeline. And the top part will state like the major events that happen in your life, right? So from the time of birth to maybe like parents divorced when you were 3, was in a car accident, was 18, maybe had an abortion at 22, mom died when I was 32, right? So you write down all those major events that happened and then label them in terms of timeline, right? And then below you write some of the major health events that happened to you as well. And it's amazing. It's highly emotional and it takes time to fill it up. By the way, it's just one sheet, but it can take a long time to fill it up because you've got new things coming out for you. Sometimes we bury things, we don't want to think about it. And one of the things that I remember when I was doing it, I ended up crying because it was so emotional. How many things came out for me that I studied. Instead, what was emotional about it was finding the connection between an event that happened and like 3 months later developing a symptom. And this is something that throughout the years I was in private practice, when women who did the health stories like that, they would say the same thing. It's like, my mom, I was a caregiver to my mom for 3 years and my mom passed away. And then 2 months later, I started having like all the symptoms of Hashimoto's disease, right? So to your point about, the question that just came up, stress could be a huge one. It's a major event that happened in your life, right? Having viral infections, so things like the EBV virus, for example, mono, right? Epstein-Barr virus could be hugely triggering as well. So any kind of infections can trigger an autoimmune disease to come back. So whoever says, things that if you had Hashimoto's or Graves' in the past and you healed yourself and you think it's never gonna come back, let me say this now, ain't gonna happen. Once the part of your body is triggered, it's on, and it's gonna come back on when we do stupid things, or when things are just thrown at us, right? It's part of life. But the thing is that, I find it like I'm totally at peace with that. I'm like, okay, so what? I had a flare up. It's not gonna kill me. I just need to go back to 3 months of just behaving myself and doing the things that nurture me, right? And, we always call it an 80-20, right? So you do 80% of the time things for healing and certain self-nurturing, and 20% is just like for fun, even if it means you pay the price for it later. All right, let's see what else we've got. If you have hypo, do you need to show or exhibit all hypo symptoms like all? No, you don't. Absolutely not. So for example, for me, I never had any weight gain at all. Zero. I was a super athlete back then, and that didn't. So I mean, you can be an athlete and still put on weight. Some women do, some women don't. I had anxiety, but I never had depression, right? So absolutely not. Yeah, just some is good enough to get diagnosed. Rock is saying stressors could give birth. A C-section be considered a big stressor because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and lupus after each birth. Yes, absolutely. So 100%. When I was in private practice, I only worked with, at the beginning, I only worked with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism patients, women. And whenever we did an intake, I had two major clients. One was women who developed Hashimoto's postpartum, and the other one was women who just turned into menopause and their thyroid and the Hashimoto's just became really obvious. So, I mean, birth, C-section, that is huge, so absolutely. And lupus, I mean, that's another form of an autoimmune disease. So again, autoimmunity can start off with a lot of stress, for sure. Tanya is saying, I'm hypo Hashimoto's and I had a hysterectomy. I feel horrible. All levels are off. Where do I start? So, Tanya, I would say that start off with, I always want to encourage you to start off with the elimination diet. The elimination diet, which the whole book is based on, cuts out gluten, dairy, soy, corn, excessive sugar out of your diet. And guess what? By doing that, your whole inflammation comes down. Hey, guys, when your immune system is on fire, right, you're inflamed. Your body is stressed out. It doesn't have to be stress, emotional stress. It can be physical stress. It can be physiological stress within your body, right? So just lowering the inflammation down, right, is going to be huge. It's going to help you so much. I would say that would be the first thing. One of the cool things I think about the book is that not only does it, like if you follow the recipes and the meal plan that we have for you, 14-day meal plan, the meal plan is structured in a way, and the recipes are structured in a way that it will help you with your gut, is going to help you with your liver, and is going to bring down your blood sugar levels immediately if you follow the meal plan. All of that happens, all three of them happens at the same time. You don't even have to think about it. We did the job of incorporating all these foods in here so that you get a full treatment, if you will, right? But without having that, oh, then what do I do for my gut? I need to do like the elimination. And then for my liver, I need to do this. And for my blood sugar levels, I need to do this. You don't need to do that. It's all done here for you. Which foods support and help the thyroid? There isn't, so Melissa, so this is where there isn't one food. Is actually, so remember when I said most thyroid conditions are Hashimoto's, and it's not the thyroid we want to go after. We want to go after the immune system. You guys have to start asking me questions about the immune system, not about the thyroid, okay? The thyroid is the second stop on the bus route. The first stop is your immune system. So ask me questions about what helps your immune system. And that's bringing the inflammation down, bringing in foods that are highly healing for the gut. So things like collagen, things like bone broth, things like fermented foods if you don't have histamine problems, right? Foods that are cooked, not raw. Foods that are non-processed, right? Those are some of the, bringing in prebiotic rich foods, probiotic rich foods. So prebiotic rich foods will be things like Jerusalem artichoke and cold potato, not sweet potato, but white potato, cold rice, right? Those are all wonderful resistant starch, prebiotic kind of foods, and we have a number of recipes for them in the book. I like saying, when do I know that medication is necessary with Hashimoto's? So you know it when, so you know it when your symptoms are just really, really bad, right? And, you know, when I was in private practice, I had colleagues who would say, who are purist, and they say, never on medications. In fact, some of them will be crazy enough, because it's completely illegal for us as health coaches to be saying to people, I want you off medication. Like, you should never be doing that. If you're a health coach, you should never be doing that. Even a nutritionist should never do that. So I had these colleagues who'd be like, I don't want any of my clients on medications. I want them to just treat the thyroid naturally. Yet this woman is on the sofa in a horizontal position, like 6 hours a day, because she can't get up. Her brain isn't working properly because she's so brain fog, by the way, is one of the symptoms of hypothyroidism as well. She can't even retain anything that she's reading in whatever material you've sent her, or books that she's reading, because her brain isn't working properly. She can't get herself over to a supermarket to buy food, let alone cook it, right? I mean, you can't be expecting someone like that to be, you know, cooking for herself and taking care of herself when she's non-functional. So I believe that for patients like that, you gotta get on meds first, okay? And so when the symptoms are really deep and they really compromise the quality of your life, and especially in functions that can really help you in order to help yourself feel better, like cooking and shopping and reading and studying and educating yourself and being here on a call and listening to all of this, right? Some people can't do it because they're so brain fogged and so foggy brained, right? Then I think this is a time when you get on medication, you know, and work with your practitioner, find somebody who can put you on meds and say, look, I really want to get off meds in the next 1 or 2 years. I just need this temporary boost. You know, you just do it, what it takes. I was on meds for a while as well. I was losing hair so much so that it was terrifying. And so I ended up being on a T3 hormone. And then I fixed my thyroid and I got off it as soon as I could. And I worked with my doctor to get me off. He was a functional MD in New York, and I lived in New York at that point, you know, and that was my whole mission. It's like, I wanted to address it because the hair loss was causing so much of stress for me as a woman, to be seeing so much hair loss every day, that I was like, I couldn't focus on anything else. I was just terrified, especially when you do a lot of that kind of video, you know, camera facing work. When you want to look healthy, you need to look healthy. You want to look healthy. And here is like, very, so anyway, so there was back then I was only on meds for about 4 months. And after that I got off and never again. Amy is saying, can a large thyroid nodule cause or impede thyroid function? I have many of the symptoms of hypersymptoms and can't gain weight and high anxiety, digestion issues. I also tested positive for Epstein-Barr. So Amy, I'm wondering have you been tested for Graves' disease as well? And there is TSI antibodies that are TSI antibodies is what you test for, to rule out or confirm Graves' disease. So I would highly recommend for you to do that. So in some women, thyroid nodules, yes, the thyroid nodules create a concentration and they can release a higher thyroid hormone. So yes, that is absolutely possible. And so anxiety, digestive issues, I mean, all of that sounds like, you know, autoimmunity in the making. So if you are confirmed with hyperthyroidism, I do recommend for those of you also who want to address more of hyperthyroidism, which is more rare as compared to Hashimoto's. There is a really great resource and so look up Dr. Eric Osansky, and he's got a wonderful, I think it's called Natural Endocrine Solutions or something like that. He's very functional and really wonderful content, and he his stuff will help you. But I tell you this now, that 90% of his stuff is exactly the same thing what all of us teach when it comes to autoimmunity. Repair your gut, bring the inflammation down, support your thyroid, support your liver function, right? And that's gonna be your the beginning of your healing path. Can you sell or ship the book to Canadians? Angela, yes, we can. If you go to overcomingestrogendominance.com, there's international shipping and so international purchase. And so click on that and that will give you the Canadian shipping rates. We have that set up already. What do I eat if I'm vegan? Yeah, so it's whatever you can, whatever you can. The biggest thing with Ritu is asking. So the biggest thing, Ritu, is to remove dairy and wheat from your diet, right? And just focus on the things that you can eat. Protein is gonna be important for you, especially with regulating blood sugar levels. So all the lentils, amongst all the lentils, I'm assuming you're Indian. All the lentils, especially red lentils, are just really wonderful because they are the easiest to digest. One of the challenges that I find with vegans and vegetarians is that you guys rely on a lot of your proteins on legumes, and a lot of people with autoimmune diseases have so compromised digestive system that it can't tolerate legumes, and so pick and choose those ones that really agree with you. One big thing to consider is when you're picking a food, then that food has to make you feel good. If you're eating legumes and it makes you bloated and it makes you gassy, right? Makes you uncomfortable, it's painful, then it's not a right food for you, because that constantly is aggravating your digestive system. A compromised digestive system, a struggling digestive system, is a form of stress that's going to release cortisol. Your inflammation goes up, your immune system suffers again. So it's like this vicious cycle of just feeding you never recover. Basically, put it this way, you guys, if you have Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, right, or any other autoimmune disease, if you don't fix your gut, if your digestion isn't in a really good place, when you're pooping regularly, your poop is in a good, nice shape, you don't have any digestive issues like bloating, constipation, acid reflux, pain in the digestion, right? Burping, right? Bloating, which is like so many women are so used to being bloated that it's considered normal. Let me tell you, it is not normal, right? Addressing things like parasites in your, which so many people have, or other viral infections, right? Candida is another one, yeast overgrowth. So if you don't address those gut issues without autoimmunity, you're never gonna be able to resolve your autoimmune condition. And worse still, I have seen this before where, I would be contacted. So this was a common issue when I was in private practice. I'll have a call from someone saying, I want to work with you, but I'm kind of scared of making changes in the diet. My husband doesn't want me to change things. And then she doesn't do anything, right? And then she contacts me like 2 years later. And then she's like, things are not looking great. I've got like a major flare up. And now, besides Hashimoto's, I've just been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, like true story, right? And I've seen this many times before. So really, by you fixing your gut is like you just buying yourself insurance for life. All right, let's take one or two more questions and then we're gonna start wrapping up. Cheryl is saying, can you get a diagnosis of estrogen dominance and PCOS when in your 60s? That's an interesting one. I have not seen that often. Most of the time with estrogen dominance, yes. PCOS is more of a younger women's issue because of the levels of testosterone, because of high levels of estrogen. And so the answer is, I would say it's not like super common, but in younger women for sure. So Jessica, let's do one more question, and I want to just talk a little bit about thyroid nodules. So where is a good place to start to work on the immune function? My TPO is 20, but I have many hyposymptoms, already gluten-free and dairy-free for years. So yeah, Jessica, so that's great. That's a really great start when you're being gluten-free and dairy-free. I would say, it's the question is it's hard to say where to start without knowing what your symptoms are. So remember, I talked about the three-legged stool, that the immune system rests on, and a good endocrine system, a good hormonal system rests on three things: a good gut health, a healthy liver, and healthy blood sugar levels, right? So ask yourself, out of those three, what is lacking there? And then decide to derive a plan and how to work on it. And the foundation protocol in the estrogen reset program here starts off with exactly these three body systems. And it tells you how to, how to fix your gut, how to fix your blood sugar levels, etc. And how to support your liver, which is probably my favorite. I want to talk about one other thing before we wrap up, and that is thyroid nodules. So didn't really get to talk too much about that, even though that was a topic for today, but I hope that you find the rest of the conversation helpful. Thyroid is obviously a super important topic, I think, for a lot of women. Many of you here already consider yourself really lucky if you're here and you're listening to this and you've been diagnosed with thyroid condition or Hashimoto's, because you are in a minority of women who've been diagnosed correctly. There's probably millions of women. There's actually an estimation that 30% of the population is in a clinical hypothyroidism, right? That means it's like they're not really, it's kind of sad to think about it, because that's like, it just means that your brain function is not 100%, your energy levels are not 100%, your immune system is compromised, you get sick a lot, right? All that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I hope this was helpful for you guys today. But the thing I didn't get to talk much about is thyroid nodules. So since that was a topic, that's the topic for today. So let me just say, thyroid nodules are very common amongst many women. And the frustrating thing is when you go and see an allopathic doctor, traditional doctor, right? They'll go, even if they do that, right? Very seldom they don't. And they go, all right, well, let's do a sonogram, right? So they do a sonogram and you're like, okay, well, you have 2 nodules and 1 on each lobe, right? So you're like, okay, doc, what do I do? And they go, come back and see us in 6 months' time. Let's see then, right? Because then they are going like, well, I just need to monitor that for thyroid cancer. And then you go like, so what do I do in that 6 months? What can I do to help myself, right? Like, hey, if you had a growth, let me ask you this. If you had the growth like right there on your hand, like, would you want to do something about it? But sometimes like when it's something is on inside of the body, we are kind of like, well, I can live with that. And so most thyroid nodules do not become thyroid cancers, just to let you know. But I feel like it's our body's way of saying to you, like, I'm growing a nodule because I'm really struggling with your estrogen, or I'm really struggling with your toxicity, and the thyroid is like a sponge, like I explained at the beginning of this video. The thyroid is like a sponge. It attracts all the toxins, like the way I talked to you about, living through Chernobyl, right? And how we had to drink all that iodine in order to saturate the thyroid function so that the nuclear waste doesn't destroy our thyroids. So, so the interesting thing about thyroid nodules, something that no endocrinologist will tell you, and there is actual references from Mayo Clinic and the Journal of Endocrine Clinical Endocrinology, is that tells you that actually nodules in the thyroid grow because of estrogen dominance. Estrogen is like the leading feeding mechanism to the thyroid nodules. So bottom line to all of this is that when you address estrogen dominance, your thyroid nodules will shrink and will disappear. Mine have shrunk and disappeared. I was sharing in a morning video about how I went, and 2 years ago, I went and got my thyroid scanned just as a preventative thing. There was no reason why I did, but just as a preventative measure. And the technician and I became fast friends because she had major sleeping problems, and she said she did everything. And when I asked her about, like, did you try this, and she's like, no. So she's like, oh my God, I really need to listen to your advice and try this. So anyway, we became really instant friends, like while me there lying on the table. And as she was, scanning the thing and recording, and there's this big monitor right next to me. And she says, I'm not supposed to comment on your thyroid because I'm just doing the scan and the recording and the photographs, and you're going to get those interpreted by a medical practitioner. But I will say, I've never seen a healthy thyroid issue like this. It was a color one as well. So you could see like pink tissue, like really nice pink thyroid tissue. And she said, I've never seen one that looked so healthy for someone who has had Hashimoto's disease, right? So I'm just sharing this with you. That is completely possible to get rid of those nodules, is to prevent from developing thyroid cancer, which is a very common and very fast growing cancer. Most of them are not lethal. You're not going to die from them, but you most likely are going to lose 1 or 2 lobes and be on thyroid medications for the rest of your life. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to have that kind of drama in my life. So very easy to prevent it at this point, much easier than doing it later. The other thing I just want to mention to you guys is, one of the things that's kind of crazy, and I talk about it here, is that in the thyroid nodules environment is, where do you spray your perfume, right? Think about it. We spray them in here, right? So it goes like pop, pop, and you just do this, right? And then you go pop, pop. What are you spraying? What are you spraying? It's spraying on the bottom right there of your throat. This is where your thyroid is sitting, right? And so the sad thing is, especially your traditional perfumes, right? All the major brands that you see advertised everywhere, those brands are highly toxic, and they're full of what we call xenoestrogens, externally occurring estrogens. And well, the crazy thing is that you put your progesterone cream or oil here too. You know why? Because it's the fastest absorption. But we put our most toxic perfumes on our the soft part here in our forearm, right? And same thing for the thyroid, like putting perfumes like those. I'm not talking about perfumes that are made from essential oils and like really nice and clean. That's that's perfectly fine. I'm talking about those main brands that you find in, all the major stores and airports and magazines and all that stuff, right? And with a lot of very sexy women and shirtless man and that kind of ads I'm talking about, right? What do you spray it? Spraying it on your thyroid. It's like a recipe for a total disaster. So I want you to stop to use traditional perfumes. Look for essential oil-based perfumes. There's more companies now showing up doing that kind of perfumes, and that's really going to help you a lot. Okay. Are we good, Taylor? Is that all the videos, if you've been missing the previous talks that I've been doing on estrogen dominance, we've covered so many different topics already on breast health, we did the basics of estrogen dominance. Today we're talking about thyroid. I did talks on the breast health was really good, on castor oil, and we did fibroids yesterday and uterine health as well. And so a lot of really great videos, and all of them, you guys, are posted on overcomingestrogendominance.com/events. And have fun with that. All right, and we will answer the remaining questions in the comments, you guys, for those of you that didn't get into answering these questions. All right, well, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm going to be doing another video later today. I'm going to be doing a reading from the chapter on thyroid nodules, and then I can do more Q&As after that. All right, thanks, everybody, and I'll see you later.